Hey everyone, welcome to Gamecasters. Today I'm going to be doing a build video for Kullervo. Now, Kullervo has very quickly become one of my more used Warframes. Um, I recently obtained him probably, I want to say about 3 weeks ago, and honestly I did not realize how fun he is to play. And I've kind of been lacking on playing all my other characters because I've taken so much of a liking to him. So, real quick thing I will point out, I do run the glaive with Kullervo. Now, that's not something you have to make this build work. It's just I have the glaive, so of course I'm going to use it with him. But Kullervo can make almost any melee weapon in this game be a good melee weapon. Obviously, there's limitations to that. It's not going to be like great in every circumstance depending on what you use, but if you have a melee weapon you like, Kullervo's going to make it really shine for you. So another pointer I will give is I am running 5 Crimson Archon shards. Obviously, I have Tau Forged ones on him, with the exception of the 5th one. Now, that's not something that is absolutely necessary to this build, but for some increased ability range, um, I run those to make up for one of the detriments of one of the mod cards I run, which is Overextended. Overextended increases your ability range, but it also drops your ability strength. So the Archon shards are there to make up for that loss, basically. It's not to boost my strength, but it's to balance everything out. Um, but that being said, which I think I'm getting like 10 or 15% off of those with that combination. But that being said, you don't have to have the Archon shards on him to make this work. That's just one of the specific things that I have on here. So you could honestly drop Overextended for some other form of ability range, but I do it because of the 90% range increase, which goes into his curse ability, which we'll go over. So I run Swift Momentum, which has squad receives 30% heavy attack windup speed and plus 6 seconds to melee combo duration. I do this mainly because I use the glaive, but also um, the combo duration. Since Kullervo's abilities can build up his combo, I can essentially keep those combos up even longer running this. Now, if you wanted to, you could swap this out for growing power, which would make up for the ability strength that you lose from overextended, and then you could run that. It's not going to make up for the full loss, but it will combine pretty well with that. And then you could also run power drift instead of coaction drift and kind of balance those things out. But mainly I do this to get the melee damage off of that. But again, you can swap those however you need to. I do run primed flow. Has he's a little hard to keep energy management going, which is why I do run arcane energize, streamline as well. But usually those two alone are enough to keep me going, and I tend to play with others, so energy regen's not too bad. You could probably put on like energy necklace, energy nexus or equilibrium onto him in place of probably streamline or maybe fleeting expertise. No, you wouldn't want to do that in fleeting expertise because that's giving you the efficiency. There, you could modify this to work for you, but personally, this is what works really well for me. Also, my prime flow's not fully leveled up. I'm 2 ranks away from doing that, but I could have a little bit more energy on him. It's not that the energy management's bad. It's just you got to time your stuff. You got to know when to use things. Um, but anyways, I run Prime Flow, Prime Continuity for ability duration, which is mostly just making up for the fleeting expertise. And then obviously the overextended is getting uh, nullified by my Archon shards. Then Streamline to further help with ability efficiency, and then Blind Rage, which is also giving me more ability strength. Now that drops my efficiency. Thankfully, fleeting expertise and streamline kind of balance that out. And then I have stretch for more ability range and augur reach for more ability range. Now, the energy spent on abilities converted to shields, that does not matter for Kullervo. Kullervo does not have any shields at all, so that's just kind of a blank ability there. Now, if somebody can think of another ability range card that could go in place of that, by all means, whatever works for you. This is my build. I do run Arcane Energize, which again, my Arcane Energize is not fully leveled up. I just recently started working on that one a lot more, and also thanks to the event that's going on, it's a lot easier to get for the moment. And then I also run Augmented, which you can get from Zarman, which that also helps with ability strength. He basically gets stronger as the mission goes. Now, the main ability that I have built Kullervo for is his first ability. Whenever you tap this, you teleport to a target and do a heavy attack on them. This gives you a 418% increase to melee crit chance with this build, that any further attacks you do with a heavy attack, or not heavy attack, but just melee attack in general, for the 9 seconds after that, it will have that 400% increased crit chance. The duration is kind of low, but that's fine. It's a low cost cast. And also there are very few things that are going to need that 400% increase. Mostly like if you're coming across like the stronger Eximus units, or say the Acolyte pops in, you can quickly knock him out with this. There have been several times with this build that, like, even not using the glaive, that I can just one-shot the Acolytes or the Stalker when he shows up. So it works really well, especially if you have a melee weapon that is modded out properly. Recompense is where his survivability comes from, which gives you Overguard. Each time you cast the daggers, those shoot out, hit up to 10 enemies, and then each one of those daggers that does hit gives you Overguard. Now you do have to be careful with this, because with the strength that I have on this, that also further increases the damage that the daggers will do to yourself. So if you're low on health and there's not a lot of enemies around, be careful. But generally, the rule of thumb for me is, if I'm in a large group of enemies, I just cast this. Just even like if my overguard's not capped out, I'll just pop it and get it over with. So you just kind of watch your overguard while you're running around, and if you see a large group of enemies and you need overguard, just fire it off. The range is 21 meters on it with this build, so you can hit a pretty large area with them. Now, the third ability, which is where the fun begins for this build, is his Collective Curse. My curse has a 66 meter range on it, which basically what happens is you cast this curse, and any enemies that are nearby each other will link together. Those enemies will now share the melee damage, or, well, sorry, when an enemy suffers damage from you, it will be spread to all the other enemies that are connected through that curse. The other fun part is you can keep recasting this curse in different areas, which you really won't need to with the 66 meter range. You can kind of just run into the center of a huge crowd of enemies, cast your curse down, and just start lighting the room up. It is a beautiful thing. Even on Steel Path, it works phenomenally. And that also in conjunction, now I know some people subsume over his Storm of Ukko. I personally don't. I have 5,200 slash damage per second on this, and at a base value, this ability probably doesn't sound that great. But here's the thing. With the curse combination and his Storm of Ukko, it can make it a devastating attack. Now, What you do is you put the curse down, get a bunch of enemies chained together, and then you drop the Storm of Ukko in. Each one of those daggers that hits an enemy in that chain will spread the damage to all of them. It will start just lighting up rooms. And you don't even have to do anything beyond that. It will just slowly whittle down things. It's really good for crowd control. I personally like it a lot. You could subzoom over this, but I'm not entirely sure what you would want to put over it. Um, so if you have an idea for what that could be, by all means. Personally, I prefer the Storm of Ukko on it. It's a nice, just passive damage crowd control that I can use. And also, I play a lot of Duviri too, so you get in there and you start getting some of those decrees up, and this ability just turns into a map nuking ability. But beyond that, that's pretty much how the build runs. I will go into a mission and just kind of show you guys what it does. Again, you just pretty much use this to keep yourself alive, cast the curse, cast the daggers, and then just go ham with the Wrathful Advance. Have a good melee weapon equipped. So I'll go ahead and take this into a Steel Path mission real quick just to kind of show you guys how this runs. Now, again, keep in mind, I do have the glaive on, so it's going to be pretty darn strong with him. Yeah, we'll go, we'll go conjunction survival here. Go in solo. But ever since I've built out Kullervo, he's become a highly used Warframe for me. Obviously, I still have to switch out for other things. The only problem with his survivability with this build is if there's not a bunch of enemies around, which there's some boss fights that don't have a lot of adds that this might struggle with, which is where I could see you maybe making another configuration without the daggers, or the Storm of Ukko, and then going for more survivability on him. So you could have a boss build of this, and then you could have a normal running build for it. So his curse, this is the ability I was talking about, chains up the enemies, and then just spreads the damage to every enemy in that chain. You can use that in conjunction with the daggers, and it can pretty much light up entire areas. I am struggling to get my energy up here. Normally I run a little bit more. Also, starting energy for Kullervo would be pretty good to have through means of, like, the capacity. You could further form it to have better starting energy. But as I was saying, once you get this curse up and you get the daggers running, it just lights up rooms. Takes a second to get it started. Again, the energy management is kind of a learning curve for it. But if you can manage to get it up, it just clears areas. Like, I don't even have to do anything right now. It's just clearing the room for me. And then you can just kind of run through, cast your curse, and you're good. As simple as that. This is Steel Path enemies just being melted by his curse and daggers. And then, of course, you have your melee ability, which the Wrathful Advance... Oh, I lost my overguard. Give me 1 second. Build that back up real quick. Like I said, you just kind of cast this, build it up. 2 casts of it, I am already back up to 19,000 overguard. Then you can just pop up the Wrathful Advanced, and then red crits for days. Now, again, I am using the glaive, so you're seeing a lot higher numbers than you would be with most weapons, but you can run this with pretty much any melee weapon, and it's going to make it perform extraordinarily well if you've got the right mods on that weapon. A good recommendation, I would say, is the Zorus, which is the glaive that you can get from I believe it was the main story. I could be wrong on that. I know it's one of the quest reward melee weapons, but the Zorus is this one right here. This is the best alternative to the glaive, in my opinion. It works the same way. It even has a larger explosion radius. It's just, for some reason, the glaive is just broken um, in terms of damage. So, obviously, I'm running it because it's going to kill a lot of things. But outside of that, Zorus would be a good secondary recommendation. I prefer the throwing melees, but you could make this work with any melee of your preference. I usually, before I had the glaive, I did run the Inodem a lot, and that has an Incarnon mode for it. That in conjunction with the Tennokai that was recently added and the melee arcanes, that could make the melee really pop. But that's my Kullervo build for you. If you guys have any recommendations or some ideas, maybe, you can leave them down below. And if you end up trying out the build, leave a comment. Let me know how it worked for you. But this is how I enjoy running it. But it could use some tweaks here and there. Again, the energy management's a little rough starting out in a mission, but once you get the ball rolling with him, it performs extraordinarily well. And of course, I do need to get my primed flow finished leveled out. Uh, Good old endo grind for that. But thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully this video helped you out, and I will see you in the next one.